And he has led them through much growth and advancement of their cause for many, many years, for over 25 years. So in trying to find some background on Glenn, there's a program on OPB called In Their Own Words. So I found his own words from the Moss, which is the publication and the Columbia Land Trust website. And a couple of years ago, he did some musings, the muse Finding His Place. And I just want to share some of the comments that he made about growing up. So he grew up somewhere near a subdivision, in a subdivision, with lands that surrounded that subdivision, then that became subdivision. So from early on, I think he was committed to protecting lands from becoming subdivisions. Not exactly sure where that was, but there were smudge pots. So that's a clue for you. He currently lives in Portland and is somewhere near the Willamette River. So how's that for a large clue? You'll never be able to find him. In his little memoir, he said that he basically grew up going outside and exploring nature, both just outside and with his grandfather especially, and other family members. On Sundays, you just automatically knew there was going to be a hike to somewhere new. So that was pretty exciting to see that this has been a lifelong passion of his. And during that time, he, did grow up and started to see some of the social issues having to do with lands being taken over and just social issues of inequality. So he has worked not only to preserve the land, but to preserve the right of many peoples to use that land and enjoy that land and protect that land for future generations. This is a quote from him. "We are all intertwined through the gifts of this place, the air, the water, the land." He wants to be in a place where we stop and listen to each other's stories, where we recognize these amazing gifts and we give back more than we were given. He also understands, and he quotes, quote, "I grew up the day to embrace the notion that conservation, especially conservation, should concern itself with ensuring that all life mutually thrives, from the smallest insect to the largest mammals, and all people, no matter their background." And that, sorry, I gotta find my other page here. Oh, sorry, I lost that one. But that he's known for his intellectual integrity and the integrity of working with a variety of different landowners, stakeholders, and peoples of this area. So with that, Glenn, I hope that you can share some of the wonderful work that you have done with the Columbia Land Trust. And yes, we do want to take more trips with the Native Plant Society to see places. And I'm going to put in the chat box a link to a map that they have created of all the land trust properties that are available to go explore. So with that, Glenn, take it over.
Wow, that was really something, Lisa. You did your homework, finding all those. It's just wonderful to be here with you all. As people were arriving, I just really enjoyed seeing so many familiar names and friends and people that have volunteered out on land trust properties. And if maybe Gina or somebody could just let me know, are you seeing my slide okay? Does that come through, I hope?
It looks great.
Okay, great. So I'm, I think of the Native Plant Society as just one of the most authentic sincere, hardworking groups that's around. I just love your love for plants and how many of you get so involved in going outside, monitoring them and defending them. And I've gotten emails from a number of you about, hey, here's something you need to go, check on or figure out or protect. And like the Native Plant Society, I think of Columbia Land Trust as it's kind of just us. There was a dozen of us back in 1989, 1990 who thought, man, people in the Northwest just love nature, and surely we can create an organization that appeals to that love and encourages people to do positive things to protect the Northwest. And we're not opposed to groups that file lawsuits to achieve that end. We're just a group who works with landowners to conserve land. So tonight I want to tell you a little bit about our mission, where we work. Then I want to try to bring it alive by showing some images and some of the people that we've worked with. And then I'll talk a little bit about some of the threats that we're facing and what we hope to do in the future. So let's see if I can advance this slide. Our mission is pretty straightforward. We envision the Northwest with nature and people's lives interwoven, so that people so love nature that they'll care for it and they won't let anything bad happen to it. And our part of that vision is to actually physically conserve and be good stewards of some of the most important places. And so this is the area that we've worked in for these 30 plus years now. And the Columbia goes right down the middle of that and out to the ocean, and both Oregon and Washington. That's roughly 40 or 50 miles back on both sides. And we are part of a network of land trusts. There's, more than 1,000 of them all across the country. And but this is our space. This is where we work. And those highlighted areas are the different areas that we're most focused on. We've done conservation planning that's based on the model that the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has used to develop the statewide comprehensive wildlife strategy. For any of you, and I imagine many of you have dug deep into that strategy, there's really wonderful online tools if you're interested in learning more about Oregon's comprehensive wildlife strategy at the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife website. And so, but it's basically a model that our priorities are the places that have the most overlapping interest in, or overlapping diversity of life. And so the places that benefit the most species, plants and animals, are the areas that we're really working toward. And within those areas, we're looking for the places that are most important and that also have threats, but that we can do something about it. So what that's meant, and I didn't really mention, I should have here, it's across these 5 distinct ecoregions, and you all know better than anyone how dramatically different those ecoregions are, from the rainforests and the Coast Range and estuaries to the Willamette Valley and Puget Trough, and then the West Cascades up to the Cascade Peaks, the East Cascades, and the Columbia Plateau. We range from 140 inches of rain a year to 8 inches of rain a year, and everything in between. And the ecosystems and the plant communities that are, diversely across all of those ecoregions are part of what we're trying to conserve. And this map shows those same 5 ecoregions, but it's highlighted in the brighter yellow. There are places that we have actually conserved land by acquiring ownership interest. And you can see so much out towards the coast. On the Oregon side there, that's up along Willapa Bay and in the Columbia Estuary. This map is, we're enjoying so much success that I don't always have the most current maps. There's about 2,400 acres of land on the Oregon side out near the coast of forest land that was just conserved in the last month. Another 680 acres that's kind of in the Vernonia area, another older forest there that's just been conserved. And then you have a number of smaller parcels in the sort of Portland, Vancouver area and out along the Tualatin. These big ones up here are Mount St. Helens. We have 20,000 acres that we've conserved on the south side of Mount St. Helens. and then other properties out along the Hood River, and then this big cluster out on the east side there is along the Klickitat River. And again, I know that many of you have been out and help us volunteering out on these properties to monitor these, and we've had our staff out and our volunteers out identifying properties, and you found some rare and endangered plants on our properties. One of them, the obscure buttercup, which I'm sure there's a number of you who will tell me the Latin name, which I don't remember, that's out on the east on the Klickitat River that we'd found out there. So let's see. And so as Leisha alluded to, we recognize that there's people from all different cultural backgrounds that have been and are currently still out on these lands and enjoying them and benefiting from them, from indigenous people to early sheep herders to recreationalists and loggers and ranchers. And it's a place that since time immemorial has really had people, and we recognize in these probably tens of thousands of years that people have been here, that there were many of these indigenous people that moved across the landscape and had a very different model of interacting with land and understanding ownership of land and responsibility. We like to say that right now, today, Columbia Land Trust is aiming to foster a culture of stewardship. And that's certainly what we saw in a lot of these indigenous communities. So these are not all necessarily going to show Columbia Land Trust lands, but it's just acknowledging that this place that is just one of the most remarkable places in the world, in my own opinion, from the mountaintops to the alpine meadows, down to our rivers and streams. And this is there was a slideshow at the start that some of you may have seen. This is out on the Mill Creek Ridge, which I think a number of you have helped with our work out there, and removal of skeleton weed and other monitoring. I just wanted to call out, since you showed a photo of Mill Creek Ridge in your little slideshow at the start, that the nature of our work is that we do it where people help us identify where these critical places are. And it ends up, this is, Barbara Robinson, I know, has called this old growth balsam root, that she thinks some of these individual balsam root species have been there for perhaps as much as 200 years or more. And we didn't know about this place. And one of our members lived down at the bottom of the hill along Mill Creek. And I got a call from him one day saying, "Hey, Glenn, there's this place that you ought to know about. And unfortunately, it's for sale. And I think it's going to be developed. And I'm really fear for these plants, that I think it's a really unique community." And we did have Barbara Robinson go out and take a look at it. And we get a lot of calls from people. A lot of the times the land doesn't have, such special traits. In this case, she called us up and she said, "Oh my gosh, you all have got to do something." And since that time, with those original people who called us as the main advocates, we've raised hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. We've acquired hundreds of acres of land, and we're looking at expanding this area. And we're right now in this image, we are looking straight up the Mill Creek watershed. The main stem of the Mill Creek is over here. This is South Fork over here, and this is the City of Dalles watershed. And we have a project underway right now where we're looking to acquire more than 1,000 acres. It actually will go to the City of the Dalles to try to further protect the watershed there. So I just thought I'd call that out. But these great places that we live in include all the way down to the coast. And this is in Willapa Bay. That's Long Island, for some of you who've been down there. If you haven't been down there, it's just a wonderful place to paddle out to, some of the biggest, oldest trees around. And then just these places that just call out to us spiritually, just the calmness, the peace, and the connection that this has to our lives. And then I just want to acknowledge that down to the smallest creatures, that are so dependent on these places, and for whom, when we look at 115-degree days, you just think, these are creatures that are not going inside the air conditioning. These are creatures that are incredibly delicate, and just how critical it is that we all be looking out for them and doing what we can to protect them. And so the warming climate is one of the biggest threats that we see. And, certainly we're about ecological conservation and protecting plant communities. But for me, on one of those 115-degree days, as I was inside in a cooler place and I looked out at one of the chickadees on my feeder, and I just thought, in that moment, I just thought, where are these chickadees going to go? Where are these? And then even beyond that, chickadees at least can fly, but these plants, who are rooted and in so many cases, have evolved to be in a particular place, what will happen there? But we do remain optimistic because of the ecology of the Northwest. And we know that to really address these issues, the little graph here, it shows that in order to move down from the global carbon emission path, which would just keep going up and up, we need to both change how we use fossil fuels and not burn them, but we also have this thing that we're part of calling them natural climate solutions. And a big part of the change and the reduction of carbon in the atmosphere that needs to happen in the next 10 years is through natural climate solutions. And that's by getting more carbon into our forests, into our grasslands, into our wetlands. And we've seen, and the Nature Conservancy, many of you probably involved in some of these studies, but they'd identified what makes a place resilient to climate change. And they came up with several key factors: elevation, aspect, and soils. And they've done some modeling across the entire country to identify, okay, using those three criteria, where are the places that are most climate resilient? And it ends up that places like the Klickitat River Canyon are among the very most resilient, because if you've ever been up the Klickitat, and if you haven't, I hope you will have that chance someday, you have a winding river that gives the steep slopes that have more than 1,000 feet of elevation gain, very dramatic changes from south facing to north facing. And so there you've got both the elevation differential as well as the aspect change. And all of that leads, and if you're out on the Klickitat, you can see it's like a line that south facing is oak and north facing is pine and fir. So we also have relied on the work from the Nature Conservancy and others that say that forest lands and grasslands are two of the biggest areas that we need to keep in our focus for conserving. And mostly, certainly reforestation is an important thing that has to happen. That for carbon purposes, that's a long-term strategy. Right now, we're really focusing on trying to keep as many of the 30 and 40-year-old forests to be still growing to be at least 50 and 60, if not older. And so much of our private forest land harvest cycles have gotten so short that we're missing out on so much of both the ecological benefit of older forests as well as the climate benefits of older forests. And here's just a little diagram just acknowledging that, a brand new forest is really, it's just a matter of photosynthesis, right? There's just not a lot of needles, not a lot of leaves per acre. But when you look at some of these older forests, it's just dramatically more carbon that's sequestered. So for us, this has been a thing as we've focused more and more on climate and carbon, that it ends up that the places that we've been focusing on for ecological importance are also the same places that are really important for climate. So we haven't been sort of dramatically shifting priorities to respond to this increasingly urgent crisis, but we are trying to accelerate the pace at which we've been doing the work in these areas so that these really delicate plants and animals can survive. And so we've done these 50,000 acres of conservation in the last 30 years, and we're aiming to do 100,000 acres in the next 10 years. And I hazard to say, I hope it'll be 100,000 acres in the next 3 to 5 years. We really need to and want to respond. So I told you I'd tell you a few of the stories. So here's a rancher, and politically, he's probably one of the most conservative people you might ever meet. And he had ranch land out on the Klickitat River, and he was known as somebody who, you don't want to have trespassed on his land, certainly, and just sort of so he didn't want to see people coming out onto his property because he just felt like they wouldn't really care for it. And he was sort of seen as a little bit of an irascible guy, and people hadn't really thought, wow, he would conserve his land. But we knew that his land was critically important for ecologically along the Klickitat River. And we took the time to go out and we had coffee with him, and we had coffee with him again. And we started to learn more about his life. And Leisha, when you were talking about our ethic around listening to people and learning their stories, and it ended up that Bill eventually told us that his wife, Mary, who had passed away of cancer before she died, she made him promise that he would do whatever he could to make sure that their family lands were never developed. And so we, that was something that, no one ever knew about Bill. And he turned to us and said, I'm beginning to think you might be the way that I can fulfill that pledge. I made that pledge, but I never knew how I could do it. And, Bill ended up through partial donation, ended up bringing more than 2,000 acres of critical Klickitat oak woodlands into conservation with Columbia Land Trust. And so, it really came about from just taking the time to sit down, and it really affirmed the beliefs that we had when we formed the Land Trust, which is that people love nature. They love the Northwest, and especially landowners. And some of this Klickitat land, we tell the rancher's story, but now that this is also Columbia Land Trust conserved land, we've reached out to a lot of the Klickitat people, and some of you may know Wilbur Slockish and have worked with him, but some of his family's lands were out in this area as well. And so there's now more harvesting that's occurring, first foods out on these lands as well. Going all the way out to the ocean. So this is Frank Glenn, and he's Frank Glenn the fourth. Well, all the other Frank Glenns that came before him were cranberry farmers, and they did this all on the Long Beach Peninsula in Washington State. And I got a letter from Frank Glenn about 20 years ago saying, you need to help me. There is a crisis that's about to unfold, and I don't know what to do. And in his letter, he wrote about this forest that had never been cut, that goes right down the middle of the Long Beach Peninsula. And there's the Willapa Bay on the right and the Pacific Ocean on the left. And those are freshwater lakes and wetlands right down the middle of the peninsula. And Frank's grandfather had died, and the estate was being settled. And Frank's father and two brothers were in the process of trying to divide those assets. And as any family does, they're trying to be fair with, how they share those resources going from one generation to another. And in this case, that meant that this land was going to have to be either subdivided or logged because all their wealth was in this land. And you can see some of the cranberry bogs up in here, and these lakes are the source of the fresh water that makes it such a economically viable crop, although he'll be the first to tell you that it's a very difficult way of making a living. And in the end, we ended up having some of our members who contributed funding, as well as people like Paul Allen, the former owner of the Portland Trailblazers. And we raised several $1 million, and we were able to acquire this property so that it would remain intact and not be developed. And there's now more than 1,000 acres of this conserved land down there. So as we look ahead, we've identified, here's 10 areas that we're actively involved in negotiations and conversations to conserve more of this older forest land. It includes properties in both Oregon and Washington. This map shows some of the ones that are the City of the Dalles and the upper part of their watershed there. It shows several different Klickitat River Canyon properties, Lower River and Upper River. The Wild Boy Forest, which we've now acquired out along the tributary to the Washougal River. Pine Creek Forest up on the south side of Mount St. Helens. There's a big forest in Clark County that we're aiming to conserve, as well as coastal forests in the Grays River watershed along the Nema River. And then I mentioned out near Vernonia, we've already completed this one. And then also one out near Corbett. So those are our big focus areas for forests moving ahead. I want to give you, there's so much depth and I don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to give you, we have an entire, you should look this up. It's called the East Cascades Oak Partnership. It's on the web. And we've done very detailed planning to figure out, okay, well, the east side of the Cascades along the Columbia has some of the most important oak woodlands. It's in the both Washington and Oregon's comprehensive wildlife strategy is one of the highest priorities. And it's because oak woodlands are so important to so many different plants and animal species. And so we've done an amazing amount of detailed data analysis in this area that helps us identify the important places. And then we're also trying through this partnership to make it, we'll never achieve the goals that we have if it's only what Columbia Land Trust owns. We need to have all different kinds of strategies developed for other people who want to step in and help. So we've got vineyard owners and cherry orchardists and all kinds of people that are now jumping in on that East Cascades Oak Partnership. We do massive restoration projects. These are photos all taken from the same spot. And you can see the little red arrow, green arrow, red arrow. I'm not sure I'm colorblind, but this arrow that identifies, and here's the same rock spot over here and same one in each one of these 4 shots. And we removed 8 miles of road that was impinging upon the Klickitat River. Actually, the Yakima Nation did all of the engineering design and managed the construction of this. It was one of our tribal partnerships. And this is now returning the floodplain of the Klickitat back to its native condition. And this is that property I mentioned along the Washougal River that we acquired 1,300 acres from Weyerhaeuser that has some trees that are now getting a lot older. And there was a massive dam that was built on the tributary to the Columbia, to the Washougal, blocking 6 miles of stream. And the Cowlitz tribe is doing all the engineering and design and will manage the construction within the next 2 years. We anticipate removing this dam as well. So we have, very big projects. And then we go all the way down to, some of you may probably be enrolled in the backyard habitat program here in the 4-county Portland, Vancouver metropolitan area. We do this with the Audubon Society. And there's now more than 8,000 families. We have, hundreds more families every single year that are signing up for the backyard habitat program. It's one of the most inspiring part of my jobs to see the member rolls growing on the number of people that are taking action. And it's cross-cultural, it's across all different neighborhoods. It's just been astounding to see. Look at this. This is, every single one of those dots reflects where someone is participating in the backyard. They're overlaid on each other so much. But it's just, we don't have as many out in Washington County and up in Clark County, but that's just because the program just grew out to those 2 places. It's going to be taking off there even more. So we are loving, these are all people that are developing a love and an interest in plants and that are getting their hands dirty. And this is the next generation, right? These are who we'll be relying on. When I say that vision of people's lives being so intertwined with nature that they love it so much that they won't let anything bad happen to it. That's why these programs are so critical. These are the people, the kids who will be adults, who we're going to rely on to carry out this work forward. And you've all probably heard the different kinds of, different sayings about, may we stand under, may future generations stand under trees that will long outlive, any of us, but that maybe we had something to do with planting. And here's some, hundreds-year-old trees that, that's part of what we're really aiming to accomplish with this work. That's what we're aiming for, that kind of long-term goal. So I'm really towards the end of my presentation here. I think there's, maybe a couple of questions, or at least one that I've already seen that someone had sent to me directly that I can address, but I'd urge you all to start thinking about and coming up with different questions for me here. And some of you are probably, because I know you're all so actively involved in, let me see if I can stay on that picture, that in so many of these issues that you may know that earlier this year, one of the largest private landowners in the Columbia Gorge general area, SDS Lumber Company, decided to sell more than 100,000 acres of their land and all their other holdings. And this is a particular picture that's from a Columbia Land Trust property. That's Drano Lake below and near the Little White Salmon River, and a lot of the SDS lands are some right along the Little White Salmon. It's along the east side of the Hood River Valley, if you know those oak woodlands up there. And I mean, it's the lands that are all around the Trout Lake Valley. So many of you know the landscapes there. And we've done quite a bit of advising, and there's been a lot of confidentiality around the what was going to happen to those lands. But it was a competitive process that was managed by somebody who's, you know, very skilled in helping companies be sold. And a coalition of conservationists and some for-profit companies got together, and it was announced publicly just about 6 weeks ago that the property was being acquired by the Conservation Fund, and Green Diamond, a timber company from the Northwest, and WKO, a mill operator from the Gorge as well. And so that hasn't, well, purchase and sale agreements had been signed. That was what was in the press. It hadn't closed yet. It's not been acquired yet, but it's on the path to do that. And you know, we were, you know, had an active role in advising and supporting. And I can't really say too much more than that, but there's a process that's underway where those lands that transaction will be completed, and in the coming years, hopefully there'll be a lot of more action that will make the conservation of those lands permanent. So you'll look for more in the months ahead. There'll be, but it seems to be heading in a very positive direction. So that's what I've got, and I'd love to answer any questions, however you might want to frame them.
Thank you, Glenn Lamb, for that wonderful and really inspiring talk, and for just your years of hard work and dedication. That was really cool, seeing all the different projects that the Land Trust has been through, from ranching and farming and tribal nations, all the way down to just backyard gardeners. I mean, what you said, fostering a culture of stewardship, I think you really expressed that well with your talk. There's just a lot of that going on. So,
you know, and people may be typing their questions right now, and here comes some. But I do think that this fostering a culture of stewardship is worth talking about just a little bit more, because I mean that in a sort of a larger cultural sense, and that we have that culture of stewardship. But for Columbia Land Trust, stewardship is also a really like day-to-day thing. Like you all think about managing your own backyards, and then you think about 50,000 acres of land spread out at hundreds of different sites, and that you care about deeply about what happens on those properties, and that, you know, it's tied to our mission. And so, you know, it ends up, that's a very real question for us, and it's very much a part of our business. So what stewardship means to us is that before we acquire any property, we conduct detailed assessments of what the values are on that property, and we call it our baseline assessment. And it's based on, you know, the science on the property, the plants, the animals, what we find there, and we look at what the threats are in this baseline assessment. And from that, we put together a management plan. Every single one of our properties has a management plan that goes out. You know, they're 5-year planning cycles that go out decades. And in that, we identify what the purpose of each one of the properties are, and then how from that purpose that goes down to specific goals, and then strategies that support those goals. down to annual monitoring activities where somebody actually is out there, everything from making sure there isn't trespass and dumping to ensuring that plants like the obscure buttercup are protected and are being well managed. And so one of the ways that it's the heart of our stewardship program is that people like any of us have mentioned Columbia Land Trust in their estate plans. And a number of my and our long-term friends have passed since we started the land trust, and gifts that they provided are now the very basis for our ability to manage these lands. We now have more than a dozen people that are on our stewardship staff, and we've had dozens and dozens of volunteers. We've paused our volunteer program through the pandemic, but that is one way that others have helped. So I just wanted to mention stewardship is like, a lot of the times people are thinking you need to help protect this next property, but long term, of course, it's the care of these places that's probably the biggest amount of work that we have. So a couple of other questions. How can I get involved other than certifying your yard, which is a terrific and important thing. But just like you're being a member of the Native Plant Society really matters, being a member of Columbia Land Trust matters. And that's, the thousands of people that are involved in our work are it's the backbone, it's the spine, it's the essential fluids that make this all work. And so that membership is one. We're looking at whether we can, we'll be able to bring on our volunteer coordinator again this next year, and hopefully get more of those going. And we have two types of volunteers that we've managed when that program's gone in the past. And one is what we would call people who participate in episodic volunteer events, which is like to come out for a day. And the other is to become a volunteer site steward, where you begin to develop a longer term relationship with the property. And we haven't done either of those as actively during the pandemic. But there's also people on the call, on this call, who I know are out there every day helping to identify different plants on our properties. And I don't know, not to put anyone on the spot, but Susan Saul and others might be able to help answer your question, Ann Spencer, about through the Native Plant Society, ways that you can help to support Columbia Land Trust and get involved as well. And then Don Jacobson has asked us about how effective conservation easements are. And my answer to that is that a conservation easement is a tool, and it can be very effective in accomplishing a certain job. And so this is to back up a little bit, though, for people who may not be quite as familiar, but land ownership, a lot of attorneys call it as it's a bundle of sticks. And if you own a property outright, you own all the sticks in the bundle. And easements are a way, though, that you can break out that bundle of sticks into individual sticks. So, if you have a sewer easement across your property, or if you have a road access easement that your neighbor uses across your property, those are all easements. Those are sticks that have been separated. You no longer own those. The sewer company now has that easement, and they have the right to maintain their sewer line across your property. So conservation easements are the same kind of thing. It's a way for a land trust or a government agency to acquire essentially the rights of the things you never want to see happen out there. So we acquire the development rights, or the rights to mine a property for gravel, and we end up then owning those rights. And we sign a contract that pledges we'll never utilize those rights, and we'll make sure that no one else who owns the rest of the sticks in that bundle of land ever would be able to utilize them either. So what we found, Don, is that conservation easements, we think, are very effective in keeping properties from being developed. And we use those conservation easements. That's the primary time that we use an easement, is if it's a property that we just don't want to see it developed, but we don't really necessarily want to control what happens on the property beyond that. So a piece of active farmland in the Trout Lake Valley is an example of one that an easement for us is a really terrific way to accomplish that. make sure it's never developed. What we found, though, is that if you have a real intensive property management or species management objective on a property, you want to be sure that that you own that land. I don't think a conservation easement is a very good tool if you're trying to accomplish a really specific habitat goal, because in those cases, you're likely, it's hard to force someone to do an affirmative thing than it is to step in and prevent somebody from doing a negative thing, if you understand my saying. So we think that owning land outright is more important tool if you're really wanting to protect property for a habitat value, but that an easement is the better tool if all you're really wanting to do is to prevent it from being developed. So we do the next 50,000 acres that we're hoping that we're going to be part of conserving will include some of those lands in the Columbia Gorge, tens of thousands of acres there. It includes several thousand acre spots that are in the outlying fringe of the Portland, Vancouver area and near Corbett, up in the Washougal River. We're still hopeful that some of that forest land in that upper East Fork Lewis River watershed will be able to conserve up in Clark County. And then we have some very active projects that are in the thousands of acres of forest land down in both the Oregon and Washington Coast Range, which are, it's both the old forests, which ecologically from the plant perspective is really important, also from the climate perspective. And they're also, these old trees are really important to the endangered marbled murrelet. So there's a real overlay of benefits in the Coast Range old forests. And we do have local nurseries involved in providing native plants. And I can't speak to particularly which ones we've used, but I know that we get calls all the time from folks, and through our Backyard Habitat program, we have lots of partnerships with local nurseries. And so we've certainly found that local nurseries and any local plant stock is much more likely to succeed on our projects. And so that's a really important thing for us. And, you know, land trusts were, I'm just cycling through the questions if you haven't seen these here, but the land trusts were first established and conservation easements first established back in Massachusetts in the 19th century, late 19th century. And they grew in Massachusetts and New England quite a bit through the middle or later three quarters of the 20th century. And Massachusetts, for instance, I think the joke is in our field that Massachusetts has a land trust for every pond. And, you know, they're very, very local organizations. And what the National Land Trust Alliance found is that it's a lot of work to keep a land trust going. And if you've got, you know, you need to have a board of directors and a treasurer and everything for every single land trust that's out there. So in the West, they didn't really start to form until the 1980s and 1990s, around when the Columbia Land Trust formed. And so we were really encouraged to not just be so narrowly focused. We were really encouraged to try to be a broader geographic focus so that it would be a lot more efficient and effective. And that's what we've done. It means that there are some cases of very small properties that we haven't embarked on because we have so many, we're just trying to manage as many as we can, and there's a limit to what we can take on. We're funded primarily, again, it's individual donations that are that's how we start doing our work. Then we write grants from local governments, state governments, federal government, private foundations. So we'll take our members' donations, and that's our leverage point to go out then and raise all this other money. And members, I know when they hear me say we raise millions of dollars, they think, well, my $25 didn't really matter then if you're raising millions. But honestly, it's true. I've been here since we were all volunteer. And it is, we only started to take off when our membership started to grow. And that's what really is our highest leverage. We are about the federal funding. We're in this moment where we've been told that through the federal 30 by 30 program, which is conserve 30% of the country by 2030, and also through a lot of infrastructure bills and things like that, that there will be more money flowing for conservation. We haven't yet seen that. Of course, it's all just being approved right now. So yeah, and then there are basalt plateaus near St. Helens, such as Liberty Hill, and the pressure there for that to be purchased in mind. And we have been doing what we can to try to protect that spot and others like it. And you know, the reality is that especially the higher the economic value of some of these properties, and sometimes even if we can bring all the money to the table, the resource extraction companies that have it are they're just set on doing it. And so, you know, some of the toughest part of our work is working hard on something and not succeeding. And of course, we try not to have that happen, but this is a voluntary conservation project. So even with a for-profit company and we raise a lot of money for a voluntary sale, they don't always follow through. So but that area that was mentioned, those basalt plateaus and the, you know, the wildflower areas that are so vital there are definitely still threatened. And then Walden Pond, you know, I was there a few years ago as part of a National Land Trust conference, but for the life of me, I can't remember if Walden Pond is in a conservation land trust now or not. But they're certainly all across the state of Massachusetts. So have we bumped up? I can't remember right now, Gina, when we were supposed to be done, if I've gone way over.
I think we're doing all right, but yeah, thank you for sticking around and answering all of those questions. We can transition to our social hour, and we definitely invite you, Glenn Lamb, to stick around. And
Sure.
I will turn it over to Willow Elliott, the president of the Portland chapter, to take it away. Willow.
Good evening. Let's see. Can everybody see me? Yes. Wow. This is 52 people we had tonight. We broke a record. See how popular you are. It's your fan club. It's the fan club. Well, everyone who wants to just have a little time to talk directly with Glenn. Also, if any of you are here tonight as the first time new member, we'd always like to have you introduce yourself for a minute, because since March of 2020, we haven't had an in-person program. It's been tough. If you do want to let us know you're a new member, just go ahead. Don't be shy. And otherwise, I bet we have some comments that friends of yours want to make, or encouragements. Maybe Susan Saul could pipe up about one of her favorite places she's helped you with. Got anything to say tonight, Susan?
I was an early member of the Columbia Land Trust and longtime supporter. Yeah, I think when I first heard the announcement, I said, you know, this is an organization I need to support. So I don't remember what year I joined, but it was when I first learned about it. So it's been a long time. And then as opportunities have come along, we've gone out and done different volunteer projects on different preserves, mostly around either native plants or mapping weeds, which is not my idea of a fun time. I'd rather look at plants than weeds. But we did help on Mill Creek Ridge when you first started using GPS-enabled tablets to do mapping. And my most recent volunteer effort, was Paul and I helped at Pierce Island last month, looking at Raripa columbiae and mapping the occurrences there.
Thank you.
Everyone else who wants to have something to say, some of our botanists, some of our longtime members of other organizations, turn on your audio and your video and we can hear what you have to say. I do remember myself what I saw that photograph, that beautiful photograph that was in our welcome slides of Mill Creek Ridge was taken by Mary Hayden, who is our website developer, maintainer, and our newsletter editor, as well as the field trip coordinator. She heard about it. She'd been up there with one of your groups, and then we decided we should really start taking small groups up there. And it was inspirational to anyone. People like fall to their knees when they see this view and they see the very healthy endemic, the way those balsam roots grow there is spectacular. There is something amazing about it. Barbara Robinson, you mentioned, is one of the Mid-Columbia chapter's founding members, and of course the Klickitat Conservancy and many, many other things. She's now living back in Lyle, Washington. Also big supporter of the Portland chapter as well. We've trampled around with her, as well as, I just wonder, I meant to ask you, did you know Russ Jolly? Did you
No,
meet
I
him?
didn't. I didn't. I
Never
know
met
some
him.
others here on the call, I'm sure I absolutely did very well, but I didn't. I never had that opportunity.
Uh-huh. And it was really, as you probably know, Russ and Nancy Robinson and Nancy
Russell.
Russell, thank you, Don. Nancy Russell were the rabble, some of the rabble rousers who started the beautiful, the way that the gorge was saved, the Columbia Gorge Commission, just with a small group of people. So
Yeah.
we really should never think that one little effort will not amount to anything. Just look at what a few people.
Well, and you all, I mean, as I said in my presentation, I mean, we so respect your organization and the individuals involved in it, and we rely on you. I mean, you know, as I said, it's often members of the Native Plant Society that clue us into something that we should be doing. So we really do rely on you.
Don,
Glenn, I
go
just
ahead.
wanted to add that I really appreciate the work you are doing, and I appreciate the enthusiasm that you bring to it.
The humor. I like all the pictures of your staff on the website.
Oh, yeah.
You're just in the middle of them and you got the biggest smile because you love what you're doing. It's very inspirational.
Well, it is. It's been amazing. It's really been fun. And I do see there's a question about whether we work with the Northwest Indian Fisheries Commission. And I have to admit that is not familiar to me. We work with the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, which I'm not sure if that's the same thing or if there's a different one, but Asia Dakota is the newly appointed executive director of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, and she is on our board. And we work very closely with the Intertribal Fish Commission. They have a watershed fish recovery plan that was part of the basis. We looked at that and looking at our own, coming up with our own strategic conservation plan. And okay, so Northwest Indian Fisheries is more focused in Puget Sound, and we don't do any work in Puget Sound, and that may be the reason why I haven't ended up working with them so much. But I appreciate you mentioning them.
But of course, you're always networking with the Yakima and the Klickitat and the Nez Perce.
Yeah. We've tended to work more. Well, that's not true. I mean, we have worked with indigenous coalitions, but we did work, for instance, Elaine Harvey is another board member, and she's with the Rock Creek Band of the Yakima, and Asia's Klickitat, and but we're also working with the Chinook Nation on some land conservation projects, and to try to grow their own capacity. That they're a non-recognized tribe. So we've been helping to write some grants so that they might be able to get their first natural resource staff themselves, and then also the Grand Ronde, the Warm Springs, the Cowlitz. So we work directly with a number of different tribes.
Got any youth group organizations? Anybody helping you get some of the young people out there?
Well, no, I'd love, Willow, if you would head that up for us.
I've been trying to figure out how to work with youth groups, especially BIPOC and Indigenous and our Black community in Portland. It's been really a struggle during the pandemic and figuring out transportation. It's been one of the big frustrations for me, but I'm not giving up, because now we're in a stewardship program with Leach Botanical Garden, and they have somehow cracked the code on that. So
Yeah, well, and Instagram mentioned here as a potential part of the cracking of the code, and I certainly think that's true. And we've definitely been connecting with, and I mean, there are quite a few
Aaron, you're
young, there's quite a few young people of color who are actively out in nature and are posting about it on all kinds of social media. So there's quite a vibrant movement there. But go ahead, Aaron, do you want to say more? Or?
Well, I know who Erin is. I'm going to contact her. We do need help with Instagram. We have it's sitting there on our website with the icon, and we have maybe 2 Instagram photos per year that are added. We don't know how to take advantage of it. There's one board member who really understands it. And so I'll be talking to Erin. Thank you very much for and I'm not sure what you mean by how Instagram can bring in young people. I want to get them out on the ground. I want to take them to places.
Well, and Aaron may want to speak to that more. I've certainly seen that a post of a particular hike that somebody's gone on, posted on Instagram, and then you got other people going out to see it too. So it's just go ahead, Aaron.
Don't have any transportation. These are folks who can't even get across town on a bus.
But we always give rides to each other.
Oh, good. Okay. You want to do that?
I don't mind if I go, I can give people a ride. But yeah, Instagram, the way it works, they have apps to make a flyer. Then you just make the flyer with the date and time, and people can show up. The meetup is not as accessible as Instagram, I don't think, for most people. For the young people, probably. I'm guessing. I'm not really that young anymore, but I see a lot of young people organizing on Instagram.
Have you taken a look at our account? Have you become a member of the NPSO? I'd have to invite you, wouldn't
I? To be a follower, I think I started following y'all 5 years ago, but I don't see y'all come up, or us. I don't see us come up on the feed very much.
No, we're too busy doing 5,000 other things, but somebody else I know should be taking it. If you start it, it will happen.
Oh, y'all have we have a pretty Instagram. These are beautiful flowers.
Nice. Yeah, it's nice. There just isn't very much activity.
The transportation as an issue, I just got to say the pandemic has been brutal for, because there've been efforts underway leading up to the pandemic with many more bus services up to the gorge and ride sharing and I'm a huge user of the bus system, and even just here in Portland, it can get you to natural areas, and you combine a bike with a bus, and you have even more flexibility to get out to some of these places. But it has really been tough through the pandemic.
Right. I started doing some evening strolls last summer after the workday, just when people I knew they were working at home anyway, and they just wanted to get away from the computer. And I started doing them on the west side and all around. Our region is vast. It's almost as big as the Sixtorphia chapter of Washington, of which I'm sure you know. I got several members here tonight, and it's just getting to the neighborhood in a city park that is phenomenal, has a watershed, has the camas growing, if you can just get the neighbors to even realize it's in their neighborhood and get where it's on a bus stop, bus line, or easy to access, can change a child's life and can make them a lifelong conservationist. Just like you and your cul-de-sac or your little neighborhood. What state was that? Was that in Washington?
No, it wasn't. I was raised in the East. That was a suburb of Syracuse, New York.
Oh, wow. Mhm. Okay.
I would like to go back to Instagram and offer a word of caution. Most of my experiences from photographers who have noted that once locations get posted to Instagram, they get overrun, and photographers have had to abandon even going to these beautiful places because people want to go there mostly just to take a picture of themselves there and then post it on Instagram. And so with the trails that I'm familiar with in the gorge that are now being loved to death, I think one would have to use a lot of caution about posting things on Instagram that might actually end up with resource damage rather than increasing its preservation.
Yeah, this is Don, you've just touched on one of the biggest issues that we're all facing for sure. It's this balance between, I started my work in a parks department, and what the maxim within the parks departments are that, if you don't give people a place to go, they'll find the place to go. And so there's this balance between, by providing places for people to go where you've got the support services that are there, from restrooms and parking and, away from the most sensitive areas perhaps. But what happens when those get full? What happens when, for any of you who've been out to the Mill Creek Ridge, you will understand that that's one of our biggest fears is that, you can probably park like 8 cars in the little area that's there. And beyond that, you're out on a busy road, and the planted community itself is just incredibly sensitive. So I don't know. I don't have an easy answer there, Don. And it's only made worse by the fact that I've just recently been learning about some online mapping tools that are taking, I think, people's posts on Instagram and people's social media posts of all kinds. And they're now identifying trails that, maybe like 3 people went on, and it's not really a trail, but it's where somebody explored. And now it's like, oh, here's this great place you should go to. So
Great.
I
So
think
they're
that
making their own apps out of other people's selling
data.
apps. I see.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
It's a tough one.
it is, because don't we want people to fall in love with places like Memaloos, but also maybe they should leave their dog on a leash when they go out there?
Yeah.
We've got so many different land agencies, managers with so many different rules. And even in Catherine Creek, it's breaking our heart when we see what's going on there now.
Yeah.
It's just, they've increased the parking so much. Maybe Susan could say something about that, or Ron Klump, who goes there very often. What was it like a few weeks ago, Ron, when you were there? If you're still on the call. Because he just recently
It wasn't
visited.
too bad. There was only 3 cars. We're there in the middle of the week, and it was supposed to be a cold day. So we lucked out. By the time we left, I think there were 8 or 9 cars, but it's busy. It was getting busy.
And it's just,
Catherine Creek in the summer or during the wildflower season is crazy. In the
it's gotten really
cold off
intense.
season, not too bad.
Yeah, we went there on, I think it was January 1st or something like that last winter, and we were there at, I don't think 9 or 9:30, and within probably 15 minutes there were probably 40, probably 20 cars cooled up, and it was a full day, basically a spring day in the middle of the winter, and then you never used to see that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it looked like April when we got back to the cars. I took pictures because I've
yeah.
never seen it like that in January, where cars were on both sides of the road, just like in April.
And this is
You know-
this is one of those areas where there's really no active manager. The Forest Service does the best it can, but they have two of the most outstanding properties, and you never see anyone there who's actually going to ticket anyone for anything they're doing. Right?
I think people know they can do whatever they want, and despite all the signs saying dogs have to be on leash, they all ignore it. And it's save your breath, because I've had my dog on a leash and say, maybe you didn't see the sign back there. And they just, either they tell me off or they ignore me or give me a finger or something.
Exactly.
So I've stopped doing that.
Yeah. Well, Paul,
Oh,
I just wanted to say one thing real quick. Paul,
Yeah.
we found a Bitterroot last week.
right.
All right.
All
Done.
right.
And the first salt and peppers and possibly grass widows are coming up here soon too. So
It's 60 degrees outside right now in Portland. That's really strange. So you're thinking we're going to have things like that emerging, and then they're going to get clobbered by some snow, or what?
now they always do this. Is
I see.
if you look at let's see here.
By mid-December, somebody will find the first salt and peppers, and we know the places to look.
Okay.
There are little micro habitats in the Eastern Gorge where the rocks get warmed by the sun at the winter angle of the sun. And so plants are adapted, and things like salt and peppers are adapted to a long blooming season. So if it gets snowed on, species doesn't get wiped out because the others coming along later to bloom. So it's adaptations to blooming when there's a lot of moisture, because the gorge is getting a lot of rain right now.
Yep, but I'm just referring to, this is an old publication from the 80s that was put out by the MPSO the last time, 1998, survey of wildflowers, flowering shrubs, ferns, grasses of the Columbia River Gorge. It has the range of times you can find them in
Oh my
bloom.
gosh.
And so even though we think that,
Yeah.
that things are early, they've, been found, way back in the 70s and 80s,
Uh-huh.
blooming this early. So
Well, you know what? That's funny that you're showing Russ's second publication, which actually was published by our chapter, and we own the right to reprint it. I've really been thinking we should do that, don't you, Paul? Get some more of them.
yeah, it's a lot. It'll be a lot of work because it's
Not really, you just
out
go
of
take it
date.
to a printer. Well, if we were, but we could just add, we can keep it intact. If you like the idea, I have been wanting to do that since we had our 60th anniversary. And
Yep,
then add the
I'd be with
new names, in the back or something. Yes, it would be.
I
lovely.
would probably, you'd have to put it on a spreadsheet and
Yeah.
and you'd probably want to change the names now, but
Yeah. Well, but Linda will help me. Linda Hardy, my great list maker. But wow, there's so many references about, it'll be good for climate change, the fact that we are making these plant lists, and later go back and look at them, I'm assuming.
Willow, if I could just call out, I think there's one thing that needs to be said in this conversation about public access and transportation, and that's that we have a regional government here in Portland, Metro, which has passed a couple of, well, citizens of the region has passed several bond measures that have helped them acquire land. And I have really been impressed that, they are acquiring significant natural areas in the metropolitan urban area and along the fringe. And they really are working hard to engage youth across race and class. And it's just, they have I think it's called The Big Backyard or something like that, which is their regular publication that describes, that often has maps that shows where you can go. And it has stories about the great programming that they have that are really trying to connect with the youth, Willow, in the way that you think, and rightly, that we all need to. And so I just wanted to call them out as a resource that I think both because they're helping to acquire more places that will help to spread the impact, but also because they're really trying very hard to diversify this movement.
Well, is there any way that NPSO can connect with you on the lands that are not open to the public? That we could take some of our more serious plant ID groups to?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would again probably turn to Susan and maybe Paul, or people who have already been doing some of that. But we'll Ian Sinks is our stewardship director, and we have natural area managers that are throughout our region. So we just need to make sure you get the names of the right people there. But Ian would be a good place to start. And
Yes.
Aaron, it was Metro is the name. It's a government agency. It's this odd sort of regional government that works on the Oregon side of the river in Washington, Clackamas, and Multnomah counties. And they have a green spaces program. I'm probably not getting the name right, but it's within Metro, and really, really worth looking into.
I think they
Yeah,
just
it's
call them the
Metro Parks and Nature.
Thank you.
natural areas or natural.
That's my
Yeah.
summer job, Glenn, as I work
Okay.
out at Oxbow. And
Oh, great.
but I'm still waiting for them to get TriMet to bring a bus all the way out there.
Hey, I hear you. I hear you. I mean, I think that's one of the most important areas that we can all be working toward. I have yet to put in any, it just hasn't, among many things to do, that I haven't risen, but I'm a big bus user, as I said. And I think for some of those routes, it would just be terrific if they could go just a little bit further to get to some of these parks, because right now they'll get you out into the vicinity. That's why the bike bus option, if you're willing to do a little bit of biking, can sometimes just get you that last bit to where you want to be.
Yeah, although those roads out there are not too safe.
I
for
know.
bikers.
That's why I say I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just think that the Uber and Lyft should be more hooked in there, but we don't have any cell phone service, so they don't want anything to do with us out there.
Yeah. Interesting.
I see. Well, did Chaz, did you want to have anything to say? Hi, nice to meet you, Chaz.
Hi, nice to meet everyone. Some of you I already know, although electronically, virtually, whatever. Also, some of you, particularly Paul, Susan, Don. It's a long story. I'm not going to bore everyone with it here, but you may know me better as by my middle name, which is Greg. So there's only one. Anyway, hi. Glenn, I was going to put this in the chat, but it's sort of tacking on to what Don said. I've been curious, well, my wife, Cheryl Hill, and I have been curious for several years about Mill Creek Ridge, which is awesome, 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 awesome. But I have a Facebook group and website and that sort of thing. And I've become very sensitive to the issue that Don mentioned vis-a-vis Instagram and in social media in general. And for that reason, specifically with Mill Creek Ridge, also that the smaller one that's closer to 7 Mile Hill, it's
Yeah. The Four Sisters property.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's tiny. But more Mill Creek Ridge, we have just made an agreement, a pact among ourselves to never publicize any of our photos, never even mention it.
Yeah.
So is that what we should do? Is it closed to the general public? And we don't want it to be overrun.
Yeah.
There's already mention about how Catherine Creek has become. That would become it. Yeah, it would be a tragedy, and we can't have that happen. So, and it's okay if you don't have an answer right now.
Yeah, I'm afraid. I think what we're touching on here is one of the big issues of the day, and I think that probably a lot of people on the call would love to know what the answer is. On the one hand, we're fostering that culture of stewardship. We in some level, you want people to understand and be inspired by the beauty and the delicacy of nature, and yet at the other hand, especially in this digital age, the risks to it are greater than ever. And so I would welcome any member, anyone on this call, if you can offer us any counsel, where this is a learning area, I think, for us all. But yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think the Friends of the Gorge are working on it more full-time than anybody on the trail stewardship,
Right.
trail ambassador program.
Oh, yeah,
If you
absolutely.
have, if
Cheryl works with that too.
there's enough, if there are enough people walking along the trail or at the trailhead who can just give a little bit of information for first timers. We've got so many completely new to outdoor wild places who have very little knowledge of why you stay on a trail, why you don't let your dog off the leash, why you don't ride your mountain bike up a very steep, thin soil, lithosoil like Memaloose Hills, for God's sake. I'm really upset when I find mountain bike tracks in places.
And why you use the boot brush before you go in and when you come out.
And that is probably education's going to have to be the way to change things. Or you make people, you don't give them anywhere to park.
Yeah. I appreciate the education. Yeah, that's right. And that is a good program.
It's going to
that
be
ambassador
slow.
program.
It's going to be slow going, but I know just gently suggesting to somebody on Mary's Peak that they not pick every flower they see and then leave it on the picnic table because it took it 8 years to grow, changed their head a lot as soon as they knew that. So you just have to try to decide what battle you want to pick your battles, and if you
we've faced this dilemma with cave conservation for decades. I've been working on it for 50 years, and we kept cave locations secret 55 years ago when I started caving. And but it's a dilemma. If you keep a pristine site secret, then it could be destroyed through ignorance, because people don't know it's there. And otherwise, if you open it up and bring people on, then it's destroyed it's loved to death. So yeah, it's a big issue, and I haven't found a solution yet myself.
right. And these were caves with volcanic activity around them and steam and all kinds of stuff, but they still want to go in. Frank's was in Hawaii 40 years working on research, that kind of thing. So everyone, we're really excited you joined us tonight. And Paul, I need to hear from you on what your subject is in January on your talk. If you can
It's in
narrow
the
it down.
chat. Just a second here.
Have you narrowed
It
it down?
is, yep. It's on wildflower hiking, the underappreciated trails of the Wallowas.
Wallowas, yay. Okay. I was rooting for that. I know the Warners are also really, really interesting. Okay.
I will give a shout out to a book that I just read that I think most people on this call would appreciate. It's called The Drunken Botanist by Amy Stewart. And you don't even have to like alcohol to really appreciate this book. She goes into all the plants that have a connection with alcoholic drinks, but she goes into the cultural, the social, and the botanical history of each of the plants. And it's really fascinating. Again, it's called The Drunken Botanist. Amy Stewart is the author. And if you want a fun read, and it's a good one, since it's episodic, you can pick it up and put it down, do something else, and then come back to it and not worry about losing the thread. So I would recommend that. And also, being a day late and a dollar short, I really wanted to attend last month's presentation and I missed it. Was it recorded, and is there a way to access it?
Oh, yeah. Well, we have a very talented board member who can convert these to a YouTube presentation and they are up on our website now. So we have just gotten that one finished. Liz Daly also, there was you remember when we had Tom Kay speaking, we had to dump our program because it got bombed.
Yes,
This is of the Institute of Applied Ecology in Corvallis. He just recorded another similar talk on climate change with the Willamette chapter, and it is now on our chapter website under events.
great. Thank you.
We have about 6 there now, Don, and it's wonderful. It's really
It's
very-
the chapter website.
our chapter website. The state website is pretty much just at a standstill. And it looks the same it has for 25 years. No, we recreated our own website. Thanks to Mary.
Well, and I think the videos are actually on our YouTube, right?
Well, they're on our YouTube channel, which makes it very
They're on our
secure.
YouTube channel.
Makes it very secure. No one can hack that. Nobody can change that. It's on their server, the big YouTube server.
So
Yeah.
would you access it by going to YouTube and
No.
searching? No.
No, you go to our website. It's only on our YouTube channel.
Got it.
I think, is that true, Liz? Tell me, Liz, is it something can be searched on YouTube?
YouTube. Yeah,
It can be
I believe.
searched on
so.
YouTube?
I
Yes.
believe so.
Well, what the heck is the name of our YouTube channel? Tells you how much I know.
Check it out, right? Hey, I'm the one that gets our website name wrong, right? Portland Native Plant. So Glenn, just to let you know, I'm one of those certifiers for the backyard habitat.
Right.
Oh, thank
And,
you.
well, and they came up with the Portland Native Plants for our website, handle. And I'm like, no, don't make it that.
Well, yeah, we get asked a lot of questions about, well, what kind of oak is this that's growing up through my fence? And can you tell me what understory plants would do best if I were to plant them now and stuff like that? But we don't mind. We answer them.
Yeah.
So I think we maybe it's
Glenn.
8:30.
So Glenn, I just wanted to say too, I somewhat of another connection to one of the stories that you were talking about is I've been following what you guys have been doing up the Klickitat. I had friends who 26 years ago had purchased some of the property on Swale Canyon.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, right there. And it was really a variety of things that made it so that they didn't, access and just a lot of things. And the rails to trails were coming in. And anyway, they have property on Horseshoe Bend. So still kind of.
Oh,
on
yeah.
Klickitat. But they, I guess maybe got that letter, or Bill and Mary shared that letter of conservation that you guys had written them. So I've actually seen that letter.
Oh, how
you
about
guys
that?
wrote them. Yeah. So that was pretty exciting just to see that all the way around. And I do appreciate that you've been working with the Yakama Nation at the other end of it. So,
Yeah.
so great work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And on that note about, finding a spot and, people, too many people going there. I did put in the chat the link to your piece that was done on the witness tree. Is that in the Grays River area?
It is. Yep.
To not give away its location. But I mean, I could see something like that. It's like, remember the big Sitka spruce that was right off the highway on the way to Cannon Beach, and that area just got really, really trampled. And I guess ultimately it was lightning that took out that tree, not humans. But yeah, it's definitely hard. It's like you want to share these places and conserve these places. But yet having wilderness rules or something is almost too limiting.
Let's see, someone wants to know how to find out more about backyard habitat certification. No, the info is not on our NPSO website. It's on the Audubon.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that one. Yeah, you can.
It's on the Audubon website.
if you
Or
just
the
put in
Columbia
that.
Land Trust.
Columbia Land
Yeah.
Trust.
Yeah, Yeah, either one. But if you just do a search for Backyard Habitat Certification Program Portland, and it'll get you there. I'm sorry I didn't answer that one.
Wow, how did that partnership ever even start? Seems a little, I never heard the history, and I was a volunteer for Audubon for years.
Yeah, there was another land trust in the Portland area called Three Rivers Land Conservancy, which we ended up merging with. And the former executive director with Three River Lands Conservancy, a woman named Jane Cronland. And this was all her idea. She thought we need to get more people involved in the urban area. And the only way to really do conservation in the urban area is lot by lot, because it's all so subdivided. And she thought that, Portland Audubon had access to a lot of people and people that came through Portland Audubon. And she thought maybe this would be a great partnership to tap into the many, many people who are involved in Portland Audubon and see if they could do something in their own yards. So that was how the initial connection was made. And then when Columbia Land Trust combined with Three Rivers, the program carried over to us, and it's just taken off.
Yep, it's wonderful. It's really incredible. We're still waiting for them to get around to, people have been waiting in
I know.
Clackamas County. But
That's our biggest challenge, is that we don't even really promote it much because we know we haven't been able to keep up with the signups. So it's a good problem to have, but.
Sure, sure. And
Hey,
then,
I did one in Clackamas County last week before our board meeting. So
yeah, there's
there.
just so spread out, such a huge county. Oh, that one. Yes. But we really are so amazed at all the things you do. And I don't understand when you ever sleep, because it sounds like you're living in the car. Do a lot of traveling. You put a lot of miles on that car, I bet. So, hey, I'd like to see you out on a trail sometime.
That would be fun.
Everyone else, spring will be here sooner than you know. We're gonna get we'd like to have an in-person hike leader planning meeting again. And we're gonna do it somehow. We're gonna get it out. We'll get people out there. We never stopped going out on the trail the whole time during the pandemic in small groups. It was important to stay sane that way.
Too late for me.
Well, Ron, we can't let Ron go with us because he's already crazy. We take notes from him.
You'll be in trouble.
See you out there. Thanks, everybody. And
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Oh, yeah, you bet.
Good
Thank
night.
you all.
Thank you.
Energized.
Oh.
Okay, thanks again.
Good night.
Holidays.
Night all.
Bye, everybody. Good evening.